Hi, my eighth graders. Sorry I couldn't be with you today. So we are going to go ahead and talk about what you need to work on. So let me go ahead and take you to Schoology. So what we're going to work on today, first of all, is to go over the answers to the science inquiry review sheet. So what you want to do is to go ahead and have that open on your screen. Or if you can't have it open on your screen, then just go ahead and follow on my screen and we can go over to the answers to the review sheet. Now, let me just tell you the test itself, which will be tomorrow, is going to look very, very, very similar to this review sheet. So pay close attention to it. In fact, it's going to go over questions such as observation inferences. You will have another experiment that you will have to read and answer questions that are pretty much similar to the ones that are on your review sheet. So let's go over the answers first. Okay. So question number 1, there are 30 student chairs in the science room. This is actually an observation because you can actually see 30 chairs. Number 2, there is an orange shirt hanging in Ms. Dazan's room. Even though this statement is not true, it is still considered an observation because you can see, smell, taste, or touch it. Number 3, Ms. Dazan has Christmas lights set up, so she must like Christmas. This is an inference because you're assuming that I like Christmas just based upon the Christmas lights being up. Number 4, Ms. Dazan's favorite Disney character is Stitch. Same thing with number 3. Number 4 is the same way. You assume that I like the character Stitch just because there is a Stitch character in the room. Number 5, Ms. Dazan has a Cincinnati foam finger on the wall. You can actually see that, so therefore this is an observation. Number 6, there is an American flag in the corner of the science room. Again, same thing. You can actually see the American flag in the science room, so therefore it is an observation. Number 7, there are 2 sinks in the science room. Again, even though that there is actually 4 sinks in the room, actually 5, this is still considered an observation. Not a true, correct observation, but again, it is still considered an observation because you can count the number of sinks. Number 8, Ms. Dazan dislikes Xavier University. Okay, this is actually an inference. You infer the fact that I dislike Xavier just because I like UC. Number 9, Ms. Dazan has pictures of a little boy in her room. He must be her son. This was a tricky one for some people. This is actually an inference because you don't know if those pictures are of my son or my nephew, or could literally be the picture that came in the picture frame. Number 10, there are science instruments sitting out for an 8th grade science experiment. That is an inference because you don't know if it's for 8th grade, you don't know if it's for 7th grade, you don't know if it was just stuff that I was playing with. All right, in part 2, you have to read this experiment and answer the following questions. So I'm going to go ahead and reread the experiment. So you are working on a science experiment to see what can make water boil faster. Your thought was that adding salt to the water will make the water boil faster. For experiment, you used a pot filled with 5 cups of water. You placed the pot with the water onto the burner at high temperature. You timed how long it would take for the water to boil. Then you allowed everything to cool down, the pot, the burner, and the water. You repeat the experiment again, but this time you added 5 tablespoons of salt before you turned on the burner. You performed the entire experiment over 3 times. The data collected was then graphed. You discovered adding the salt did not change the time it took for the water to boil. So in question number 1, what was the problem under investigation? The problem under investigation is, does salt affect the time that water boils? So you're trying to see whether or not adding salt versus not adding salt actually affects the time that water boils. Number 2, what hypothesis did you have to your problem? Okay, for your thought, according to this statement, is your thought was that adding salt to the water will make the water boil faster. So this is actually your hypothesis. Okay. In number 3, in the experiment, what variables were controlled? Again, controlled variables are variables that you keep the same the entire time. There are hundreds of them you could name on this one. The biggest problem that a lot of 8th graders have when they write out control variables is that they aren't specific enough. So for instance, in number 3, if you just say the pot, okay, that isn't enough. You have to actually explain how is the pot a control variable. So for instance, if you say used the same pot for the entire experiment, okay, that would be sufficient, okay. You could also say made sure that only 3 tablespoons of salt was used for each trial. If you just say, just use salt in every trial, did you use it for all 3 trials? Did you all 6 trials? How many trials? Okay. And then on here, they use the same stove. You could also said use the same type of water. You could said made sure that the pot was cooled down each time. You could say that you always made sure you use the same type of salt each time. Again, control variables are variables that are kept the same the entire experiment so that it doesn't affect your results. Number 4, identify the independent variable. Again, independent variable is what you're testing. It's what you're experimenting on. It's what you're trying to figure out. So in this case, it would be using salt versus not using salt in the water. Okay? In number 5, dependent variable is the variable that you're going to measure. So in this case, we added salt in 3 trials versus not adding salt in 3 trials. There was one variable we always measured each time, and that is time the water boils. In number 6, what kind of graph should be made with this experiment? So in this case, okay, yes, it does sound like that this one should be one that's done over time. Okay, so it sounds like this should be a line graph. Number 7, why did you need to repeat the experiment more than 3 times? There's always a golden rule. When it comes to doing experiments, you always want to repeat experiments 3 or more times because it ensures accuracy and reliability. In other words, it's make sure that every single time you do this experiment, you're going to get the same results every single time. Number 8, what conclusion did you come up with for your experiment? Okay. Well, it looks like the last line is our conclusion statement. Okay. You discovered that adding the salt did not change the time it took the water to boil. Okay. So that is actually your conclusion, that salt does not have an effect on the rate of boiling. So your answers can be word for word or it can be paraphrased. Those are both correct answers. And number 9, what would you do differently for this experiment? There's a lot of things that you could write down here, but it all has to do with the fact that you're trying to test the boiling water. So you could say, try using a different pot, okay? Or maybe using a different brand of salt, okay? Or maybe you start with cold water and hot water. Okay, there's a whole bunch of things you could put down for question number 9. It just has to relate to the experiment itself. Okay, so that is the first thing you need to do. Make sure that you understand how all the questions on here. Again, your test tomorrow. It probably will take 2 bells to complete your test. The first part of your test is going to be online. It'll have some matching or multiple choice on there. Okay, no fill in the blank. If there is a fill in the blank, then there will be a word bank provided. The second half of the test actually has to do with, again, reading the experiment, answering some questions, and then you're going to be asked to graph something. So the graphing, major things you guys want to look for graphing. First of all, make sure you know whether you're going to have to do a bar graph or a line graph. Make sure that you have correct intervals, meaning if you can go by ones, go by ones. Always start with a smaller number, then 2s, then 3s, then 5s, then 10s. Okay, make the biggest graph you possibly can, so that's why you always start with ones. Labels, 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 labels. Make sure there's labels on the horizontal axis and labels on the vertical axis. Title, units are also major things that people forget. And in some cases, you might need an answer or a key or a legend for your graph. Okay, so this is the first assignment that I want you guys to go over. The next assignment I want you to work on is actually in Schoology. And in Schoology, you are going to do a study practice, okay? It's going to be this one right here that says Science Inquiry and Technology Practice Test, okay? It's not an actual practice test. What you're going to do is you're going to go to Quizlet. You're going to click on the following link for these Quizlet cards. Some of you may have already seen them before, okay? And according to the directions, it says set up a practice test. The test must contain multiple choice, matching, and true-false. Take the test and take a screenshot of your test score. You need to get at least a 90% or higher and submit your screenshot of the score here in Schoology. It must show your entire screen, not just the score. So when I click on this, it's going to take me to the study cards, okay? Then what you want to do is you want to click on this word here that says test. Now, again, the directions say that you need to have at least multiple choice, true, false, and or matching, okay? So if you go down here to options, you could actually click and unclick your choices, okay? So I don't want necessarily any written. You can have written if you want, okay? And then your question limit, I actually want you to do your max, which is of 17 questions. Okay, you can't do any more, but I want you to do the max limit. And then you're going to leave this as term for first, okay? And then you're going to click on create a new test. And then basically you just fill in your test just like you normally would, okay? At the very end, you're going to click on check answers. And what ended up happening is, this one is that I took earlier just to click on some random answers and questions. This is what I got. So notice my grade is a 41%. Unfortunately, that does not count to receive full credit. This number must actually be a 90% or higher. So then what you'll need to do is you'll take the test over again. Switch it up. Keep changing the type of questions on there, okay? Again, you have to have at least matching, multiple choice, and true, false, and score at least a 90. This entire screen is what I need a screenshot of, okay? When you get that screenshot, you're going to then submit it here into Schoology, okay? The last thing I want you guys to do is you're going to watch a video in Schoology that has to do with a project that you're going to start working on, okay? The project is going to, and you're going to see due dates for the project, okay? Biggest thing about this project is that you get to choose how you create your project and who you're going to work with. So again, when you get an opportunity, once you have those items done, which is the review sheet and also the science inquiry practice test, take the rest of the time and watch the video on the science inquiry project, okay? It'll give you a better idea, kind of like an introduction of what this project's going to look like. We are definitely going to start looking at this on Monday, okay? So just open it up and watch the video. Hopefully I'll see you guys tomorrow. I probably will not be around for my first bell. So with that being said, tomorrow's your test. So make sure you take some time in the morning, especially first bell, to study. If your teacher, your sub, hasn't already done so, make sure you remind them that you need a mask break, okay? So otherwise, I will see you tomorrow, guys.